Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. And guess what? It's listener question day. Seth Nelson.
Bring it on, Pete.
Here we go. We got a lot of questions. And I have to say, we've just been going through the questions. And if you don't hear your question specifically, just know we're probably bundling it with other questions. We had some that are a little bit repetitive, so we kind of picked the one that we felt addressed the issue most clearly, and we're kind of moving forward that because we do have more questions, I think, for a single episode than we've ever had, and I'm very excited to dig in. So here we go. Number one, this is from Digitally Drained. What was divorce like before cell phones and email? It feels like antique. Just like
right.
A different era. I feel the constant communication with my ex and even my lawyers is so stressful. I'm court-ordered to use a co-parenting app and respond in 24 hours. My ex will send 2 to 5 messages a day. It's exhausting. We also do daily FaceTimes for the kids, also exhausting during my time. I feel prior to cell phones, divorce must have been so much less invasive and stressful. I'd like to have just one day to not interact with my ex, but I am not allowed. What do you think?
Well, great question. So, yeah, I mean, it was less evasive for all of our lives before cell phones. I've actually recently gotten in the habit of turning off all notifications, and my phone is constantly on Do Not Disturb. And I will check it periodically throughout the day, and I'm just much more focused, much more relaxed, much more in tune to what I'm doing, and more effective, I think. So think about that. Now, let's talk about communication. So there's things you can do to make this less stressful. I'm not a big fan of the having to respond within 24 hours. I see that in a lot of plans. I prefer once a day, because if you check that app at 8 a.m. on Friday morning and you do not have your children that morning, but you're getting them that afternoon and for the weekend. Well, technically, you're supposed to check that app again by 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, but you have the kids and they're up and you're making them pancakes. So you check it at noon. So the once a day, if there's any way to talk to your lawyer in your local jurisdiction or get that amended to once a day, I find that to be more peaceful for people. Then, once a day, or in compliance with your court order, you sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to take my 10 minutes. I'm going to check in. And you got to do it in a spot that's good for you. You're in the right state of mind, where you're not rushing, you're not going somewhere, you're not in an Uber, and you check it. And then you respond accordingly. And we're going to talk about communication later in this show on some of the questions on how to communicate with our favorite book, Biff, that we've mentioned before. So that's one way. Second is the FaceTime calls with the kids. There will come a time when they will have their own phones. There will come a time, like usually with these FaceTime calls where you're doing it through the app, it's with kids that don't have their own cell phones. So I hear you. There's an agreement or there's a court order, whether ordered by the court or not, and it's going to be something that you're going to have to help your kids with. Hopefully, the other parent is helping the kids when you want to talk to them. So if you can try to get a mindset of this isn't invasive as in my life of I got to deal with them. It's like, hey, I'm setting up a call for my kids. No different than if they were calling grandma. No different if they're calling grandpa. No different if they were calling a friend at that age. So part of this is mindset. On the 2 to 5 messages a day, that's why you're going to set apart a time to answer those all at the same time. You don't have to keep getting dinged, right? We've talked about this before, Pete. Everyone has a cell phone for one reason and one reason only, for their convenience. Don't let that be a one-way ticket for the other person to harass and annoy you. But that's totally about you setting the boundary for yourself to say, okay, 6 o'clock at night, I'm going to check in, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to make dinner. However you want to manage your life. Maybe you do it first thing in the morning, get it out of the way and move on, right? Whatever works for you. But hopefully some of those strategies will be less evasive and stressful.
I'm just curious on the first part of that question, though, because we have. It seems like divorce has adapted to the technology that exists and sort of enforced using that technology to enhance, I guess, I say that in quotes, to enhance the relationship between kids and co-parenting adults. But what was the alternative before FaceTimes every day and 2 to 4 texts? And when we weren't texting, I mean, it's not that long ago that it was much harder to do this. So what did the court ask you to do?
Well, it was, and I wasn't really practicing.
Yeah, okay.
And divorce. I mean, we were still texting back then, but it's gotten progressively more, and we got all these apps now, and so it's certainly been on that train. So there were more emails, right? Now it's more text messages, okay, and kind of before cell phones, and I don't know this from personal experience, but if you just think about it, at some levels it was better. They were gone with you all weekend, but then maybe you had to be home between 6 and 7 Friday night and Saturday night because that was the phone call to the other parent, and you had to have a landline, right? So with everything, there's positives and negatives. You didn't know what your kid was doing all weekend, right? Some people that made them very stressful. So, but I totally get it. I don't think this is unique to divorce. I think this is unique to everyone tying their cell phones.
The times we are living in. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, this one from Flight Planning. If I move across the country with my children prior to any legal action being filed, is this allowed in Florida? I read the statute and it seems it is, and I do not need to apply for relocation so long as I wait to file for divorce after the move. Is there anything wrong with this legally? Can my ex force me back? I'm trying to escape a bad situation.
Okay, so this is asking a very specific legal question. Since we don't give legal advice, I'm not going to answer it specifically.
Okay.
Go talk to a lawyer and get very specific advice. There is generally very tricky things here. Let's just assume someone is married and they move across the state lines and they go whatever, Florida to California. Let's make it hard, right?
Okay.
And you're not divorced. Well, we live in a free society. You can move, but what implication is that going to have on your case? I don't think a court is going to look too kindly when you got up and moved, even though you were legally allowed to do so. And now you've set up a long distance parenting plan. And then you go to court and you're like, I want to stay in California. And the judge says, that's fine, but the kids are going to go to school in Florida. So there's implications on your actions when you get to the final parenting plan. Do you want to be the long distance parent? Because you're assuming the court's going to believe and get all the information into evidence to say, yeah, you should have been allowed to move. And there's very specific reasons why you might be allowed to move under the relocation statute in Florida. But check your local jurisdiction. You can always file for divorce and ask to move and explain why. And look at that statute and get with the lawyer. And there's part of it is, do you have a job offer? Is it better living circumstances? What's the place best for the kids, like schooling? There's all sorts of factors. No one ever looks around the country and finds the best possible schools and the best possible job. And let's say that's in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and says, I'm moving there. Have you ever been there? Not once, Judge, but it's the best school and the best job. They're always like, I'm going to go to California where I have a support system and my family lives, right? So I'm not answering this specifically. Please check with your lawyer. Also, if this is a paternity case, please check with your lawyer. Also, be aware that there's the UCCJEA, Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Enforcement Act, that talks about what happens when parents move and go across state lines and where the case will be held. So you might be in California trying a Florida case in our hypothetical. Check with a lawyer.
Okay. Question number 3, alter afterthoughts. I do not want to be a divorced person. How can I get an annulment? My ex misrepresented himself to me, pretending to be kind and loving and respectful of me. Once we got married, he became abusive and is clearly a narcissist. Is this grounds for an annulment? Our marriage has only been 16 months. Can I still get an annulment so I don't have the stigma of divorce?
So one, I don't think there's much of a stigma of divorce anymore, especially if you just say I was married for 16 months, made a mistake. I didn't understand who the person was when I married them. Okay. Check your local jurisdiction. Different jurisdictions have different requirements for annulment. Okay. I have found historically it's easier to get divorced than it is to get an annulment. You can always check with your local jurisdiction, your lawyer, but in the pleadings, when you file for anything in the law, you can argue in the alternative. Hey, I would like to have a cup of decaf, but if you don't have decaf, I'll take caffeinated coffee, right? One or the other. You can go in and say, I would like an annulment. However, if you don't grant me an annulment, I would like a divorce. So you don't have to have two separate full proceedings. They can be two separate counts.
But this idea of feeling strongly about an annulment versus a divorce, that's something you're just going to have to roll the dice on.
Yeah, I think that's really an internal thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Okay.
And we've talked about it with a really great Catholic priest about how the Catholic Church deals with annulments, which I found very interesting, that you have to be no longer married, whether by annulment or divorce, in a civil setting before the church will look into doing an annulment. So usually when you think of an annulment, most people think of that as religious issues as opposed to our legal system, non-religious issues. But there are annulments within the statute, but check your local jurisdiction.
Next question. This one's from Ricky M. Should I tell my lawyer about the emotional progress I'm making, or is that irrelevant to the legal case? Seth talks about working with a therapist, but does the team care about what I'm doing when I'm not doing something specifically for the case?
So I think, Pete, in looking at this, we should tie this in with some other questions down below about kind of taking care of ourselves.
Okay.
So there's some other ones in here that people had really good questions about, hey, what about seeing a counselor before we even hire a lawyer to get through kind of the emotional issues before we get to the legal issues? There were questions about when's the best time to get a mental health professional involved? Can I get a mental health professional involved after I'm divorced to help me get onto the next stage of my life? So we had a lot of kind of mental health questions.
We did, and I'll just follow up. The next one, is there any benefit to working with a family systems coach before starting the divorce process? Can doing this emotional work influence outcomes like custody or co-parenting agreements? This from Bashir.
So let's just talk mental health generally. The sooner the better. It's a difficult time. So with a difficult time, I just think that what we should be doing is, hey, I need help from you, mental health professional, to help me personally get through this process. In the best scenario, if you are already going to dissolve your marriage, you and your spouse go to the same mental health professional. That's a good one. There's good and bad, of course. And you say, we want your help in getting through the emotional aspects of this. We're not asking you to divide the property. We're not asking you to create a parenting plan. We might ask you if you have parenting plan suggestions that you found have been best for kids at certain ages that we've talked about on the toaster. But getting that work done early and not saying things like, I want this to be an amicable divorce, because though you might want that right when you say or do something, because we're not going to be perfect in this process, that hurts the other side. They're like, well, I thought you wanted amicable, but you're not acting that way now. So be very careful with what you say. Like, I want to get through this with the least amount of misunderstanding and pain as possible. Because there will be misunderstandings. There will be pain, right? So we have these shorthand terms that I think get in the way when we don't meet those expectations from the other side. The answer is yes. It can certainly alleviate a lot of cost, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. If both parties really, in the grieving process of a relationship ending, are at acceptance. And that's really what you're talking about if you're doing this ahead of time. So if you're at acceptance and now we're just dividing up the pie, but there will still be emotional attachments to pieces of that pie. I want to keep the house for the kids. Well, okay, that's the underlying reason. But can we get another house in the same school district? Like we've talked about, don't just get positional. What's the reasoning behind it? And can we work through solutions? And along with that, if you're in the process and you're seeing a mental health counselor, I don't think it's worth your money to talk to your lawyer about what you're learning in your mental health counseling. It's not that they don't care. It's they will see your improvements by how you are responding to the stressors of the divorce process and the stressors of dissolving your marriage and the stressors of figuring out the money. So you don't have to have a meeting with your lawyer to say, let me tell you what I've learned in counseling. People will mention it just intuitively, like, oh, my counselor said. But I would just stay focused. Take whatever your counselor is giving you as homework to practice, to breathe, to not have triggers, how to deal with them, and put those into practice when you're in talking with your lawyer in court or whatever part of the divorce process you're dealing with. And they'll know that you're on the right track.
Demonstrate it in practice. Love it.
Yeah. And then after divorce is always a good time. How did you get where you were? How do you avoid making the mistakes that you made? And maybe it wasn't a mistake on your part. Maybe when you met someone, there were no red flags about mental health issues, and then they developed later in your spouse, right? Maybe there was no red flags about suffering from alcoholism. Maybe you didn't see the signs that there might have been about some other issues. So that's the hard work to say, I don't want to ever do this again. How do I, make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to improve myself?
Right. Next question comes from Second Scrutiny. How does the court evaluate claims that a child is being harmed emotionally by a parent's new partner? We just got through a disastrous divorce, and now that it's done, my former spouse is threatening to take us back to court because she says my new partner is somehow dangerous. She is not dangerous.
Okay, so let me first start with the threatening to take us back to court. This is my view. You are going to cross this bridge if and when it comes your way. If someone says, I'm going to take you back to court, okay, I will deal with that when and if someone shows up on my doorstep and gives me legal paperwork that they're trying to reopen the case. So in Florida, check your local jurisdiction, you have to have a substantial change in circumstances. Having someone remarry or have a new partner in and of itself is not a substantial change in circumstances. And having the former partner, say that the new partner is harming the children emotionally is a tough road to prove in court, depending on what the information and evidence will be. If you have a new partner that is overstepping their bounds and they are not being a supportive role in supporting you with your decisions, but trying to be involved in your decisions and telling you what to do with dealing with your former spouse, telling you what to do with the kids, making pickup and drop-offs difficult, having them, you call me mom or you call me dad. Like, that's not your real dad on the other side. I care about you. Like, yeah, that's a problem. Probably shouldn't be with someone like that around your kids. You're just having them mess up your kids.
Right. That's a you problem, not just a former spouse problem.
Well, that's your new partner's problem. Yeah, and It's a problem for you. It's a problem for your kids and obviously for your former spouse. But if they kind of know their place to be supportive of you and the decisions that you're making, not be involved in those decisions, not reading or writing your emails or writing your text messages or, that's it. But look, do not worry about being threatened. If it comes your way, go talk to a lawyer.
Okay. Next question comes from Duration Dilemma. How should I think about the mediation format when considering multiple shorter 2-hour sessions versus a marathon session? Note, my soon-to-be ex plans to attend by herself, but will run it by her lawyer after who has blown up our initial temporary agreement the last time we tried mediation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, the frustrating thing here is it seems like, and look, everyone's always trying to save money, but which is a good thing. But the problem is if you're mediating with someone who's not going to sign the document that day, then they're going to take the document and say, okay, let my lawyer review it. And then the lawyer's going to say, rightfully so, what the lawyer's supposed to do. Did you think about this? What about that? Do you understand that this provision has an impact to this other provision? Or, oh, this is a contract ambiguity. You say one thing in one part of the contract, another in the other part of the contract. Or this is a little bit ambiguous. Let's flush that out. And now the lawyer is doing what their client's asking them to do, review the contract, but pointing out problems. Then they come back to you and you're like, oh, they blew up the agreement. I appreciate that sentimentality. Now, maybe the lawyer did blow up the agreement. I was in my first hypothetical giving the lawyer the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the lawyer is just trying to churn a fee. So in doing that, it makes it more difficult because all the parties are not in the room at the time. And that's the magic of mediation. Everybody's in the same room at the same time, focused on it. Now, back to the first part. Multiple shorter 2-hour sessions versus a marathon session. Those are harder. You are so pressed for time, so you really got to be organized. I don't like to have multiple 2-hour sessions. I'm like, hey, if we're going to do it, let's book 9 to 5.
Do it till it's done. Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying stay till 3 a.m. And, we have our own personal lives and sometimes we have hard stops because we have our own kids and we have to get to a play, right?
Sure.
Or family in town or whatever the case may be. But so I never will make an agreement that, hey, I will go to mediation for as long as it takes. Because if it's 2 a.m, now my client's exhausted and under duress. That's not helping anybody. So, but to be prepared, if you're going for 2 hours, then maybe you just focus on 1 or 2 issues, which makes it harder to sell because there's less things to work with.
Sure. Because issues relate to one another.
Right.
Throughout the day. Okay.
Yep. That's right.
All right.
But if you can leave there and get that one part signed, then you go on to the next one. But I would have an agenda. Be clear what we're talking about. No one's raising any other issues, but these 2 issues for these 2 hours. Do the best you can.
Next question comes from Going Crazy in Key West. This is beefy. My ex loves sending emails, long emails, 5 to 10 paragraphs that he sends 4 to 5 times a day whenever he has our child. They contain almost no useful information and are mostly his opinions questioning my parenting or on minute details of our child's day and how much fun they are having. He sometimes requests weird information from me, like how to deal with a hangnail on our child, and demands I tell him how to fix it or to give him an exact meal plan that our child will eat. However, I find it very controlling and stressful, as nothing I send over is enough. I recently have been trying Yellow Rock responses and to only answer what was specifically asked. However, I offer something like a food our child likes because he asked. He demands to know why I think that's good for him and to justify my food choices further. I don't think I should respond to those types of emails, but our court order says I have to reply to him within, say it with me now, 24
hours.
If I disagree with something he says and simply state, I think we have different perceptions on this event, he wants to know how I could view it differently and what specifically do I view differently. I know this is a trap to get me to fight with him for court purposes. I'm worried responding will cause legal troubles, and I'm worried not responding will also cause legal troubles. Sometimes he even sends an email about all the great stuff he's doing as a father, and I don't respond to him because there's no question asked, and I'm not sure what to say. And he says I'm violating the court order because I didn't respond. What am I to do?
Okay, so talk to your lawyer. Okay, I think, generally speaking, that the type of detail you're talking about, a judge, as long as you're responding about things that are relevant, like, hey, you put it out, like, you don't have to keep going back and forth. And remember, it's just once a day, or you have the 24-hour problem that we discussed before. But read the book, Biff. Please. Brief, informative, friendly, and fair, because I think that is the best book to talk about how to deal with these types of issues. If you have a app that you're dealing with, use the tone meter. But yeah, this is just, it feels ad nauseum. But oh my God, here we go again. I got to answer every little thing. I would not have an issue going to court and saying, Judge, this isn't what this is designed to do. Right. But talk to your lawyer, and then I strongly suggest, if your lawyer will do it, or at least inquire your lawyer, hey, will you review these messages? And it will be expensive at first, and kind of teach me how to respond after you read the book, Biff.
The book, Biff, by Bill Eddy. He is a fantastic asset to the field of dealing with high conflict situations. You can also check out his podcast with Megan Hunter, It's All Your Fault. high conflict people from the High Conflict Institute. We'll put links in the show notes. Very, very useful resources there. Next question from Divine Direction. This is a question I can answer. Can you host a panel of different religious leaders, Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, Hindu, etc., and get their perspectives on divorce and getting through difficult situations in life and of healing after divorce? Well, we haven't done a panel, but we've done 3 episodes, 2 rabbis and a priest, walk into a podcast. No.
Yeah,
and
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, and those were fantastic conversations, and I would encourage you to do that. They offer exactly what you're asking for, though we don't have Muslim and Hindu on the list. But it's a provocative question.
Look, you got to answer one, Pete.
I got to answer one. That's what I get. Just show up, read, answer one question. Here we go. Next one is from Shield Seeking. This is our last question. I just finished a 3-year high conflict divorce. It was horrible and has financially ruined me. I am heavily in debt and have nothing left. The main issue was child custody. None of our marital assets were worth any sort of money, and unfortunately, my ex was unwilling to be reasonable and would even end mediation as soon as it started. My ex makes significantly more than I do and has family money. I want to protect my financial well-being should my ex file for modifications, etc. in the future, but also if I remarry and have children with a new partner. I feel like it's such bad luck that happened to me, and like a bad car accident or medical condition requiring surgery, there has to be something I can do to protect myself from spending 6-figure legal fees. Can a prenuptial agreement help for a future marriage? Any advice?
Yes, a prenup can help. That's the answer. So you can't do a prenup on kid issues in Florida, check your local jurisdiction, or child support issues, but you can on equitable distribution, the division of assets and debts. You can on alimony. You can on attorney's fees, though in some states, temporary fees to get you through the divorce process are or may not be enforceable. So please check your local jurisdiction on that. But yes, when you get married, you enter into a contract, whether you know it or like it or not. You don't know the terms of that contract because, for example, in Florida, there's different amounts or lengths of time that you might receive alimony at the highest point of time, depending on how long you're married. So how do you know when you first get married what that point will be? You don't. You don't know whether you'll be married 10 years, 5 years, 20 years. And depending on those timeframes will depend on the most alimony in length of time that you might be able to receive. You don't know what your standard of living will be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, what your incomes will be, where you'll be living, how much assets or debts will you have. So you can resolve all those types of issues by entering into a prenup. And there's different ways to write prenups. And when you write a prenup, it could be the perfect prenup, but then you got to live your life protecting the prenup so you're not commingling money. Check your local jurisdiction because that can hollow out the division of assets if you're moving money all around, marital, non-marital. If you're not really keeping track of the prenup in the way you should be when you're actually living your life. Because you're like, oh, we got a prenup, I'm safe, I'll put it on the shelf, I won't think about it. But you need to think about it because your course of dealing with your spouse and how you handle money, your actions can gut the prenup and you're left with a hollow document. But yes, that is the way to try to avoid it. Now, when you said the main issue was child custody, I can solve that problem in the second marriage. Don't have kids. Sounds silly, but I don't know your age or what you're doing, and you might want to have kids because they're amazing. But, let's just
that is certainly one option.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right.
So I love these listener questions. They're like in quick. They're really interesting when we read them all, Pete, because we even had more that were, a lot of them dealt with 2 things, communication and mental health. So we really combined those because we had a lot more on that. But it's so nice to hear what people are really looking for and to send these questions in, and hopefully we can help them in some small way.
Yeah, the things they're really living through. That's hugely helpful for us too. So thank you, everybody, for participating, for heading over to howtosplitatoaster.com and submitting your questions. We're thrilled to be able to continue to read and answer these questions to the best of our ability without giving any legal advice. Please check your local jurisdiction and talk to an attorney. And that's all we've got. We're taking a little bit of a break this season, and we'll have more news about what's coming up in short order. On behalf of Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, I'm Pete Wright. And we'll see you right back here next season on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.
How to Split a Toaster is part of the True Story FM podcast network, produced by Andy Nelson, music by T. Bless and the Professionals and DB Studios. Seth Nelson is an attorney with NLG Divorce and Family Law with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of NLG Divorce and Family Law. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.